So hopefully you should all now be seeing my screen. So first things first, this presentation is going to be an interactive presentation. So you can join in by getting your trusty mobile phone and going to the camera app. And when you're on the camera app, if you just point it at the QR code on the screen, it'll say open AHA Slides in Safari or whatever your browser is, and you can go straight to our interactive slides. So I can see 6 people have joined, and hopefully a few more will be able to join. You can also join on a normal computer by going to ahaslides.com/LRFF 2021. We've got 7 people. I'll give it another second or so just as a few more people come in. So I will just give you a quick kind of disclaimer as well. I was supposed to have some really cool images and things like that, but unfortunately the application has crashed just before coming on today. So it's just going to be a lot of me talking, but I'm sure we'll all manage anyway. So I can see a few more people have just joined. We're up to 10, so I think we'll move on. And remember, you can join at any time by going to ahaslides.com/LRFF 2021. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Elspeth. I am the Education and Public Engagement Officer for ICRAG over here in Ireland. I'm joining you from Dublin today. So ICRAG is the Irish Centre for Research in Applied Geosciences. But alongside that, I am also the Education Officer for the Palaeontological Association. So my background is actually in paleontology, but I moved over to become a science communicator a little bit later in my career. So let's make a start. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we move on to the kind of main content. So you're all brilliant already, you're all on mute. Raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, but also if you've joined on your mobile or online, you can see that you can ask questions throughout the talk and we will get to them at the end. Now, another thing that I'll just mention now is that I'm joined today by the wonderful David Legg and Aileen Doran, who will be answering your questions with me towards the end of the talk. So if you'd like to ask a question virtually, no, over audio, then all you need to do is ask a question or raise your hand, sorry, and we'll get to those in the end. You don't have to keep your video on if you don't want to. If you're putting things in the chat, just treat other people like you'd want to be treated, and feel free to interact with our presentation throughout. And as we've already established, tech is being very well, I think there are some gremlins in the tech today, so bear with us and we'll try and get it sorted as soon as possible if anything does go wrong. So let's make a start. So I can't see you today because obviously I'm here in Dublin and you are somewhere else in the world, but I'd like to learn more about you. So hopefully you should, we've already got a few people joining in with our presentation. So I want to know whether you're in primary school, secondary school, whether you're at university or whether you are a grown-up. And that's, whether you consider yourself a grown-up and whether you are a grown-up is quite often something very different. But okay, we've got 4 seconds remaining, 2, 1. All right, okay, so I'm seeing that most people here are in primary school, but we've got an even split between university students and grown-ups. So that's going to be really helpful for me to kind of help to pitch this. So let's move on to our next slide. So if you are, say, on the younger end, do you want to be a scientist when you grow up? So I'm seeing lots of yeses, some maybes, lots more yeses. That's really good. I'm really pleased to hear that. Excellent. And remember, you can join in at any time by going to ahaslides.com/LRFF 2021. Okay, so about 90% of people do want to be scientists in the future. That's really good to hear. I think most people have probably already put their answers in. That's really interesting for me to learn. All right, so I've got one more question for you before I start talking about what geoscience is, and that is, how do you feel about your knowledge of earth science? Do you feel like you know lots? Do you feel like you know a bit, but you're not really that sure? Or do you feel like you don't know anything at all and you're wanting to learn lots more today? So if you can, I need to open submission for that one. There we go. You've got 45 seconds. You can tell me what you know. Okay, lots of people feeling like they know lots. A few people feeling not sure, and one person feeling like they don't really know anything at all. Okay. Well, I think if I do some quick mental maths, we've got 10 people. I can see 12 people watching, so there's 2 more people to put in their answers. We'll give them another few seconds. But okay, so hopefully you're going to learn some more about the careers open to you and how you can become a geoscientist and supplement that knowledge of earth science that you already have. Okay, so for now, I'm going to stop my sharing so we can focus back on me for a second. So I'll just pin myself. So again, very sorry, I don't have my slides because they're broken. But let's start off with what geoscience is. So geoscience, for those of you that don't know ever so much about it, it's the study of the earth, and that can include almost every single aspect of the earth. So obviously geoscience is linked very strongly with rocks, but that's not it for geoscience. There's so much more. Geoscience covers both rocks and the landscape, up into the Earth's atmosphere, the hydrosphere as well, and it doesn't have to be limited to our planet. Geoscience is also something that you can study on other planetary bodies too. For example, I've got some friends that are looking at meteorites, and other people are doing things like looking at glaciers on Mars, and that's all covered under the spectrum of geoscience too. So it's something that's really broad, and there's something there for absolutely everybody to be involved in. So the next thing that I kind of want to talk about is why geoscience is important. So geoscience, let's not shy away from it. It's had a reasonably checkered past. If you were told to think of a geoscientist in the past, then it might have been someone that goes and drills for oil or digs up coal or something like that. And that's absolutely correct. That is those are some things that geoscientists do. But that's not it for geoscience. Geoscience is actually really important for our sustainable future as a society and the sustainable future of our planet altogether. So one of the things that researchers at ICRAG, which is where I work, are studying is actually looking into how we can look at minerals and metals that are needed for a sustainable future. So if you were to think, for example, about, well, the device that you're watching this talk on right now. So I am talking to you through a computer, and I was showing you my phone earlier. Now, these things are all made of things, right? But where do the components come from? Just think about that for a second. Do we grow the components that go into computers and phones? No, we don't. So that means that they must have come from mining, because there's a saying in geoscience, if it's not grown, then it's mined. So as we move forward into a new sustainable future, another thing that we're very aware of is our need for new technologies. So this can be things like more wind turbines going up, or more people getting solar panels on their houses, or even things like getting an electric car. I would love to have a Tesla if I could afford one. But again, like we were saying with the computers and the phones and things like that, they all have to be made from something. And if you can't grow the components, then they have to be mined. And as we move forward into this sustainable future for our planet, we're going to need to mine more of these essential minerals and metals so that we, as a society, can build more of these technologies to become sustainable. So geoscience is really, really important for that. And that's something that we at ICRAG are working really hard on. But that's not it for geoscience. That's just one example. Another really good example, and one that links really nicely with paleontology, is actually studying climate change. So again, we know that our Earth system is warming, and this is not necessarily going to be a good thing for the human race. Well, one of the ways that we can learn more about it and learn more about what it could possibly mean for our society is we could look at past climate change. So there's a whole branch of paleontology that's focused on looking at, say, extinctions in the past and seeing how life rebounded from these massive extinction events, or seeing how organisms, animals and plants, how they reacted to warming in the past, or global cooling and things like that, which is really, really important, because if we look at the past, we might be able to tell what's going to happen in the future, and we can help to plan for what's going to happen in the future as well. Or as you'll probably learn from David Legg, who's going to be answering your questions along with Aileen later, another thing that you can do is you can actually help, or you can actually learn more about the family tree of life, which is really, really interesting. So we can learn where we as humans came from by looking at fossils in the past, and that's really, really interesting as well. So if we go back to our slides, then I'm going to ask you another question, and that is, do you know what geoscientists do? And you've got 34 seconds to put in your guesses. What do geoscientists do? There's probably not going to be right or wrong answers, so get typing and we can see what people think. And I'm going to have some water because I've been doing lots of talking. Okay, you've got 15 seconds. Look at rocks. That's a good start. Study climate change, study the Earth. Absolutely. Do we have any more? Study volcanoes. Yep. Okay, I'm just going to reopen submissions in case anybody else has anything to put in. So we're seeing rock chemistry, paleontology, volcanoes. They're all sounding really cool and really interesting, and they're all absolutely right. So yeah, these are just some of the potential things that you can study as a geoscientist. Ooh, what else have we got in there? Yeah, study the Earth, earth science, brilliant stuff. Okay, so if we go back to me, there are so many different options that you can potentially do as a geoscientist. Remember how I was saying that geoscience is the study of basically everything on the Earth, and not just the Earth, rocky planetary bodies as well, like asteroids and Mars and other planets as well you can study. So there, basically, if you can think of it, there is probably something that you can do. Now, I'm not going to give you a long list of careers because that would be really boring for you to listen to, basically. But what I am going to do is I'm going to give you a few ideas, and I'm going to do that by telling you some fact files from other people that are already successful in either geoscience or paleontology. Now, again, sorry that pictures and things aren't going to pop up, but just bear with me and you can imagine for now. So the first person that I'm going to introduce, you will meet her later when we get to the question and answer session. But for now, we'll go through her fact file. So this is Aileen. So Aileen Doran, and she is a fantastic researcher based here at UCD, University College Dublin, in ICRAG. So I asked Aileen whether she went to university, and I asked this of all of the different people that we're going to meet today. I asked them whether they went to university, whether they originally wanted to be a paleontologist or a geoscientist, whether they did any training or internships. I asked them about their field work. I asked them about a day in their life, and I also asked them about the best and worst parts of their job. So Aileen, she went to university. In fact, all of our people that we're going to meet today did go to university. And the interesting thing about Aileen is that she didn't actually want to be a geoscientist all the way through. So geoscience was just a course that she almost ended up on, because with the Irish system, you kind of list the courses that you want to apply to in numerical order, and then you get assigned to one. So originally, Aileen had put her top choices as a different course. She wanted to do psychology, but she ended up being kind of landed with geoscience, and she hasn't looked back since. So she did an undergraduate down in Cork, and she did lots of field work for that, and she ended up doing a PhD, and she specialized in geochemistry, sorry. And you'll learn much more about her when we actually talk to her in a minute. So she says that the best part of her job is meeting so many different people, and also getting to learn and talk to them about different parts of geoscience that you never knew even existed, and to do more and more projects, and learn about all the different parts of geoscience and what it can be linked to. Also, one of the things that she says is that in academia, it's much more flexible than a 9-to-5 job. So you can start at 10 and work till 6, or you could even work at the weekend and have Monday and Tuesday off if you wanted to. Normally that's the kind of thing that you can do in paleontology. And she says that her advice for someone that wants to be a paleontologist, or for just anybody that wants to be a geoscientist in general, is that there are so many different routes that you can take. So find an area that interests you the most, and you can tailor your career to the thing that you love and that you're passionate about. So I guess another example of someone that studies geoscience or works in geoscience but isn't a paleontologist would actually be me. So as at school, I knew that I was interested in geography, but I wanted really to be an astrophysicist. So that's someone that studies the planets, basically. But the awkward thing about that is that I wasn't very good at physics, and I wasn't very good at maths. So there was me taking all of my exams, absolutely hating it. And my results when I did my A-levels, so back in my day, you did your AS and A2, and you did 2 different exams instead of the one that you have now. But I got my AS results back, and it showed that I not only didn't like physics and maths, I wasn't very good at them either. So I sat down and I thought about the things that I actually liked and I was actually interested in, and that's how I found geoscience. And I ended up applying to do geoscience at the University of Manchester. And when I was there, I actually fell into another course called Geography and Geology, where I got to study the kind of physical geography side of things, but also learn more about sedimentology and paleontology. And through that, I specialised in being a paleontologist. So I did a master's, which is like a long research project that you do at the end of your undergraduate degree. and then I did a PhD. I'm still doing a PhD. I just handed it in a few weeks ago, and I have my viva soon. So that's like a really long research project. It's about 3 or 4 years of work where you add something to the body of knowledge that's already known about the subject that you're interested in. So I ended up doing that. But something that I was always very interested in when I was at university was doing science communication. So doing talks like this, although they're normally with working slideshows, to people such as yourselves, or doing exhibitions and doing all sorts of different things, linking the science that we did or that I did to make it interesting to the publics. So it ended up, when I was doing my PhD, that I was doing much more work on the science communication side than I was actually doing on my PhD research. So at that point I thought, okay, I think I need to look at jobs that aren't in paleontology. So that's how I fell into my science communication career. So that's what I do now. I take the research that researchers in ICRAG do, and I make it accessible to public. So one thing that I will talk about a little bit later is an exhibition that was actually on last week at the Royal Society on some of that mining and metals that I mentioned earlier on in the talk. That's got some really good resources for careers, so I'll link you to that later. But some other really good examples of paleontologists. I won't talk about David now. I'll let him introduce himself when we get to the question and answer session. But if you go to the PALAS website, you'll be able to see the PALAS Council, so that's the Palaeontological Association Council. So I got some of those people to talk about their journeys through geoscience to become or to have the jobs that they have today. So they all went to university, but they did lots of different things. So our diversity officer, who is called Farid, who's from Lebanon, he went to university and studied life sciences. So he didn't actually focus on geology. He just did some kind of extra courses on geology. So he kind of fell into it that way. Again, it's a really good example of finding something that you're interested in and focusing on that and seeing whether that links to geoscience or not. And he does some really cool stuff. So he studies taphonomy. If anybody went to Thomas Clement's talk yesterday, you'll have learned how taphonomy is all about the process in between a living organism becoming a fossil, which is really, really cool. So one of the coolest parts that Faris said of his job is that he gets to do lots of field work, and he gets to go all over the world to do his field work. He's been to look for fossils in Morocco, in China, in the Czech Republic, and in Lebanon, his home country. So he says that that's the best part of his job, getting to travel and do field work. But very much like Aileen, he also says that meeting new people is one of the best parts of his job too. Now, an example of someone that is a paleontologist but isn't a researcher could be Jo, who's our executive officer at PALAS. Now, she did study geology as an undergrad, while she studied environmental geosciences. And she didn't know that she wanted to be a geoscientist when she grew up. It's something that she absolutely fell into at A-level, and she loved it. And she said that when she got the opportunity to do paleo courses at university, that she absolutely jumped on the chance as well. So she said that the best part of her job, because she does lots of admin sides, is that she gets to tell people when they win awards for Pala, so you can apply for money to do really cool science, and she gets to tell them that, and that's her favourite part of the job. But the advice that she'd give to anybody that wants to be a paleontologist is to do what interests you, and don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Do what's for you and stick with it. Another slightly different career is the wonderful Liz Hyde, who's the director of the Sedgwick Museum in Cambridge. So it's kind of like an earth science museum. It's really, really cool. If anybody's been there, then you'll know how cool it is. But Liz did study geology and did a PhD, which is that really long research project that I spoke about. She did her PhD in Cambridge, and she said that although she didn't always know that she wanted to be a geologist, she'd always loved the outdoors and collecting rocks and fossils. And that's one of the really cool things about paleontology or geoscience in general, that you get to go outdoors so much and do so much work outside in nature. But then again, you don't have to do that side if you don't want to. You can also stay in museums or do computational things as well. So there's loads and loads of options open to you. So Liz says that the best part of her job is enabling people to get excited about fossils. And I have to say that that's one of my favourite parts of the job as well, watching people get excited about geoscience. So with that, I will kind of end that section. But what we'll do is we'll move on to our next section on the slides. So I will share my screen again, and I have another question for you. So if you want to be a geoscientist, do you know how you can become a geoscientist? You're not sure, but you have a couple of ideas. So that's a couple of people have, 3 people kind of have ideas, but they're not sure. Person not knowing anything. 1 person knowing exactly what to do. That's good for you. Yeah, a few people knowing exactly what to do, but most people kind of not sure, but they have a couple of ideas. All right, well, this next section is going to be the section for you. Okay, so I'll stop sharing this again. So I'm gonna break this section into 3 different parts. So first things first, we'll talk about school. So I have spoken to lots of different geoscientists as part of my job and as part of the preparation for this talk today. And one of the things that really came across was that when they wanted to become geoscientists, or before they even knew that they wanted to do geoscientists, everybody studied what was of interest to them. So remember I was saying that I wanted to be an astrophysicist, and I tried maths and I tried physics, and I didn't like them. And because I didn't like them, I didn't do very well in them. So the thing that I did do well in was geography, and that was because I really, really enjoyed it. So that's some advice that everybody that I've spoken to has for people that want to become geoscientists in the future. Do things that you enjoy, and if you enjoy them, you'll absolutely excel in them. So at school, there are a few different routes that you can potentially go down to become a geoscientist, and most of them have to do with the sciences. So if you are thinking about kind of GCSE and A-level choices, then keeping the sciences kind of open. I'm not saying that you have to do all of them, but a science or 2 sciences, are normally things that are quite good to do. But again, study the things that are interesting to you, because there are lots of artists that make very good geoscientists. So studying art, if that's what is the thing that you're passionate about, would be really useful for being a geoscientist. You don't have to do physics, chemistry and biology. Although maybe if you want to be a paleontologist, biology might be quite useful for you. I didn't study biology, but I still ended up as a paleontologist. It all depends on the things that you're interested in. But as I say, The sciences, normally good options, but also geography, and if you have the option, geology is always quite a good one to choose as well. But I'll just keep reiterating, do what you enjoy. So the next section that we'll move on to is, quite a few of you said that you were at university. So in terms of university choices, then there are some very obvious choices that you can go for, which is obviously you can study geology or geoscience, or life science and things like that. But there are also options such as biology or zoology and things like that. They all relate into the geosciences, and of course paleontology. You can do things like climate science and study past climates, and they all link in. Again, it's very much things that you're interested in. At the post-university or post-undergrad stage, now this is when you start to think about what you want to specialise in. So quite a few people that I know stayed on to do doctorate studies, PhDs, or they did masters first before becoming researchers. Or you don't have to become a researcher after you've done a master's or a PhD, but it is a good time to think about whether you want to go on and do a career in research or whether something more applied is for you. And again, there are so many different options of things that you can do there, but it's a good time to take stock. So that's kind of my very quick advice for how you can become a geoscientist in the future. So that kind of brings me to the end of my very long ramble. It's kind of felt like today. And it's my absolute pleasure to introduce two fabulous geoscientists who are going to help me take your questions. So I'm going to remove my pin and introduce the wonderful Dr. David Legg and Dr. Aileen Duran. So David is a paleontologist from ICAL in Manchester, and Aileen works with me in ICRAG. So I will let David introduce himself first.
Because I would like to introduce myself because I feel like my story is not like anyone else's when it comes to being geosciences. So I am currently a paleontologist at the University of Manchester, working as a research fellow. So as a person who actually goes out, discovers fossils, writes about them, looks at them, but I have always wanted to be a paleontologist. So my mum tells me, and she's quite legit, I believe her, that I've wanted to be a paleontologist since I was 3. We went to my older brother's school, I saw the dinosaur toys, fell in love, and then spent a lifetime obsessed with, well, I'll be honest, dinosaurs and other animals and mythology and things like that, largely because of the art. So I used to like to draw things. There was actually a big choice when I was in year 9. I had an art teacher who wanted me to stay on and do GCSE art, and I wanted to be a paleontologist, so I said, no, I'm going to do double sciences instead. So you can go in it the art way, but I was much more interested in the science. And eventually I went to university, but I wasn't sure I was actually going to go. I didn't know much about becoming a paleontologist, I'll be honest. So I did A-levels twice because I didn't do great the first time round, and then I suddenly decided, no, I want to go be a paleontologist. And I found a course in Portsmouth that was an undergraduate degree in paleontology. So I did that, then I did a master's in paleontology, and then I got a PhD in paleontology, and then I did a research fellowship at a natural history museum, and now I'm in Manchester. So it seems like a fairly different path than everyone else. Maybe I'm just very stubborn.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction, David. Yeah, it was rather different than some of the other people that I mentioned today. But now we'll hear from someone completely different who's Aileen. So I'll let you introduce yourself now, Aileen, as well.
Thanks, Elspeth. And yeah, to put it simply, I'm the complete opposite of David because I didn't even know what a geologist was until I accidentally went to college to study earth sciences. Because as Elspeth mentioned, I had my heart set on psychology for some reason, which I'm really glad that it didn't get now because it's really statistics based. That would have been awful. But thankfully, I did not get my first few choices, and I got the earth sciences course. And then in Ireland, you specialize in the second year, so that's when I got to choose geology. But it was quite a general science background, so we did all the biology, physics, and chemistry. And even though, as Elspeth mentioned, I am currently a geochemist, I did not study chemistry except for that 1 year. So it's not, even if you like aren't able to do all the courses and the classes you think you need for college now, it won't stop you because you learn as you go, and like you really don't need to. Like my secondary school didn't actually even offer chemistry because it was just one of those sciences they'd kind of decided wasn't important, which is a shame. But so here I am a few years later studying geochemistry. So I'm also a bit different than David in that I'm not a paleontologist. I use geochemistry, but I'm also an economic geologist. So it's kind of linking in what Elspeth mentioned around the mining and sustainability and trying to find metals and resources that we need to like build things like wind turbines and also like electric vehicles and things like that. So I just finished and successfully defended my PhD, which was like 4.5 years of my life, which was a long time, but it's over, so it's great. But now that was looking at metal deposits in Ireland, and now I've started a new position that's actually looking at African copper and cobalt deposits. So it's very similar in the techniques that I get to use, but it's really cool that it's in a completely different area. I get to test new ideas, and at the minute it's a lot of virtual work because obviously no one can travel at the minute, but who knows by the end of the year. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing, and I think that's kind of my background.
I think one of the most important things to have come up today is this idea of doing something that interests you and going where you're interested. Because I'd say, and I'm going to confess something now, I hope my mum's not listening, but I didn't like secondary school and I didn't turn up for classes and things like that. And I didn't do well, hence why I had to do A-levels twice, because it wasn't until I actually went to university that I started to excel. So I did, not to brag, I did really well at university. You know, I ended up with a first class degree, dissertation project prize, and ultimately, again, becoming a paleontologist because suddenly I was interested. Fossils every day, it was brilliant.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for those introductions. So now I'm gonna share my screen again because it's your turn to ask us questions. So if you go back to our AHA slides, then you should be able to ask us slides as questions, sorry, directly through the thing. So we've got our first question there, which is there a website that people can go to for further advice and guidance after this call? And yes, there absolutely is. I have a load of links that I'm going to share with you after the question and answer session, and those will cover things like a wonderful page from the Geological Society that has a full, it's like an interactive game almost, where you can discover loads more careers and things like that. So yeah, there's absolutely loads more resources that I will share with you. Are there any other questions at all? It doesn't necessarily have to be through AHA slides. You can raise your hand and ask us a question if you'd like to be vocal.
I saw the chat.
We've got another question that's just come in. What advice can you give if you want to be a geoscientist but you don't get good grades or get into university? So Is there anybody that would like to come in on that one?
I would. I know a lot of people that didn't go to university, but still do things like collect fossils, volunteer for museums. They've ended up with other jobs, but I almost feel a bit jealous at times, because when you work as a paleontologist, there are days when you don't always like it. But it seems like these people, they go out in their spare time. They have it more as a hobby. They have some of the people I know who would call themselves amateur paleontologists are on loads of research papers and actually help contribute to the scientific literature, because they actually go out and they get to know these areas. One guy I know, he knew the Isle of Wight like the back of his hand, and he would take me along and say, we're going to find this here, this here, and this here. You know, without him, I couldn't have done my research at all.
Brilliant. And do you have anything to add on that, Aileen? Like,
I guess there's a few people I've met along my journey that had kind of very different routes into geoscience as well, where they didn't get good grades or they didn't really think university was the place for them. And it wasn't until they met other people who could show them alternative routes. Like, there's a lot of online courses that you can do and online college courses that you can sign up for that have been really successful for people. And I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but in Ireland there's a lot of courses that you can do after your A levels kind of time to like help like give a stronger background in like sciences, say, for example, and a lot of people have found those really useful.
Brilliant.
Yeah, there are also societies you can join. So for instance, Elspeth might know this one. We had a paleontologist in the department in Manchester who was associated with a local geological group. And I cannot think of what the local geological group is, but they would get professionals in to talk to people who were just interested. Sorry, I've just seen two questions I absolutely love and I really want to talk.
Well, we're going to go through them in order, or in the order that they come in. So I'm going to ask the next one to David, because it's absolutely for you. But before we do that, I'll just mention internships as well. Things like, or organizations like the Geological Survey, they might do things like internships. So do have a look around, and things like geotechnical firms, all of that kind of thing, because internships are also a really good way to get into the industry without going through academia. But the next question that we'll ask is, my son loves the idea of combining paleontology and art. Any subjects that you would recommend?
Oh my God, yes. So I draw a lot. It's what I do. I actually have published artwork out there in various books. So Richard Dawkins, in one of his books, one of my sketches is actually in there. The idea is that as paleontologists and as artists, we have to both really look at the animals and look at the things in detail. Often when you're drawing something and reconstructing something, you have to think, oh, but how did this attach to this, or this bit do this? How did this bit move? And that gets you to think scientifically. In terms of any subjects, so as I mentioned before, I stopped doing art, which was probably not the best idea, as it was a subject I was best at. But in terms of combining the two, just any general science and you'll get a chance to combine the two.
Brilliant. So actually the next thing that happened was Kira raised her hand. So I think if you have a question, Kira, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hello. So currently I'm doing a biology degree through the Open University because I didn't have any science O levels. So going and doing a paleontology degree wasn't an option for me, unfortunately, as I'm 30 something. So this has sort of been my workaround. Like currently it's not really been sparking my my interests all that much, and it feels more kind of like a means to an end. So is there any way, any good resources for sort of, doing my own research to kind of, when I eventually get there, put towards a master's, and to kind of try and sort of keep me interested in doing the biology thing to get to where I need to be. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And just before you come in on this, David, because I'm sure you've got lots to say, I would just say from the PALAS side, there are undergraduate research bursaries that we offer. And I think the deadline's passed for this year, but next year, if you would like to, you can approach an academic and see whether they have any potential projects that you could work on. And yeah, PALAS offers money to pay for, basically pay for your wages and to pay for that research as well. So if you go to the PALAS website and have a look there, then that could definitely be an option for you to do like a proper, potentially publishable piece of research.
Okay.
So David,
So yeah, my thoughts on that is you sound so much like I was at some point, where you feel like there's aspects of the topic that are a bit of a slog and you feel like you're just doing them to get somewhere. Ultimately, you need a way of identifying with the subject, right?
Mm-hmm.
And seeing its end game, as it well, I say seeing its end game. So for instance, if you're doing a subject that you think, oh, this is pretty boring, trying to apply it to a topic you like might be the way to help invigorate you with it. I'm trying to think of it. So I'm not a big fan of ecology, and I say that carefully as Elspeth loves ecology.
If you're sleeping or sleeping, does not
but-
mean you have to shut the door.
Sorry. Anyway, so I'm not a big fan of ecology, but of course,
Just leave the door.
if you look at the fossil site.
If you shut the door, you'll go on a timeout.
I get it.
Leave the door.
So what I would do to learn ecology is to look at particular fossil sites and try and apply it to these particular sites with the fossils I was looking at, think about how they were living or what they were doing. It would help to keep me interested in the subject. I don't know if it suddenly made the subject the thing I wanted to do though.
Okay then.
What I also used to do, so when I was, before I went to university, one of the things that really made me think I want to be a paleontologist, I used to go to the local library and request papers on, the latest discoveries and things like that. So proper scientific journals. And there was part of me at the time that thought, oh, I'd never understand this. I'll never be able to read it. And then going through a degree and doing it, you're like, oh, actually, I understand more and more of this every day.
So I'm gonna have to wrap things up almost. We've only got two more minutes, sorry, so we can probably answer about one more question. So I'm going to put this to you, Aileen. One that's come through is, what advice do you have for someone who has a bachelor's and a master's in geoscience that can't make it into the industry or academia through saturated market and large competition? So I know that you've done both work with the Geological Survey and then you came to academia. So
yeah, actually under my undergraduate, it was kind of at a downturn as well. So I spent the 3 months applying to literally everything. I applied for a job once that required 10 years experience, not even having graduated once, because my whole logic for that is the worst they can say is no. They might be impressed. So first of all, just I know it's really tedious, but if you can apply for everything. But the one thing I did get that is actually open to people in the UK, I'm not entirely sure if Brexit has affected it, but it shouldn't. But the Geological Society Survey Ireland offers 5 graduate positions every year. So they range from things like the TELA survey, which is a national geochemistry and geophysical survey, to geoheritage and also hydrology, I believe is one still. And so there's a couple of different options you can take there, and they're open to people who've recently graduated. So you could, and actually over the last few years, all 5 of them have been filled by UK people from the UK. But yeah, that was really helpful because it introduced me to people, and it was the making of connections that really helped me to get a position with ICRAG as well, by meeting people at conferences, say, for example. So if you're in a position to present at conferences, a lot of them are free now. It's a good way to also to make more connections and meet people. But also I've been informed in particular for industry. I don't I can't verify this, but apparently LinkedIn is an amazing place to connect with industry in particular. And so I often get notifications of jobs for graduate geologists as well that are out of their master's or undergraduate in recent years. So apparently you can find a lot of really great positions and jobs and connections on LinkedIn as well.
From an academic point of view, conferences, I definitely agree with. That's how I met the people that would become my PhD supervisors.
Same, actually, yeah.
So I'm going to have to wrap things up now. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our time, but thank you so much for engaging with us today and for asking such brilliant questions. We hope that you've got a lot out of it, and remember that you can always get in touch with myself and through anybody else on the Palace Council through our website. And thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that you enjoy the rest of the festival.